So these are photographs relating to the visit of a group of Batwa pygmies, forest dwellers, to London in 1906. The rationale for their coming to Britain is really entertainment purposes. They're a visiting theatre troupe of types. And they were brought here by a hunter entrepreneur who had a contract with a circus company, and they performed in London at the Hippodrome. And at some point they're also deemed to be anthropologically interesting. So we have a series of kind of supersized cabinet cards made by W&D Downey, who was the King's official photographer, photographers to HM the King and HM Queen Alexandra. We've got Bacane, who is the male, who's also the subject of this plaster bust. So yes, I mean the very sort of language of the bust is radically different, contemplative, in ways that I think the photographs don't allow. And I suppose the sort of the poignancy of the studio images resides in this sense of radical decontextualization. So Bacani standing on this leopard skin against the studio background, pieces of sticky tape seem to have been affixed to various parts of his body to facilitate measurements of some kind. But I think this probably marked the sort of shuddering to a halt of the institution's collecting of anthropometric images. A new anthropology is in the making, a fieldwork based one. So in a sense these also, I think, stand as a memorial to, or maybe a ruin of that earlier anthropological practice.
Okay, we're just going to do it. Okay, so this is where the photos are stored, and these are acid-free boxes. Lantern slides. More lantern slides. These ones, they were obviously commercially produced, they say 1,000 miles up the Congo. This is a collection by Woolley of the last of the Tasmanians. So these are quite famous pictures. This is Trucanini, profile and full face. So these are a tribe of people who don't live, you know, they're extinct now. So that's an interesting collection. And in this particular box, there's an envelope here which says Central Australia Men's Ceremony, men only to view, which cuts me out, but you can have a look if you want to. So we'd respect that. There's some Native American Indian ones that are very interesting, but that, you know, you have to respect that they're private and shouldn't be shown. Like, you wouldn't want to put it on the internet or anything like that. But I suppose if a bona fide researcher came in, just looking at it, that would be allowed.
What's in here? So this is Edward Horace Mann, who was a colonial officer in the Andaman Islands, a group of islands in the Bay of Bengal. He was very prolific, and at various points museum curators write to him asking him to stop sending stuff because there's this sort of tidal wave of material coming in. I think what's particularly fascinating about this album is this anonymous drawing by Nicobarese artist, so an inhabitant of islands adjacent to the Andamans, and who's drawn E.H. Mann at work. So we see him with his camera on a tripod, someone holding an umbrella, a group of Knickerbockers children being photographed against a tree. Because one's sort of suddenly startled by the presence of an image coming from a completely different viewpoint in a different medium, a different register. So it strikes me, on the one hand, you could say this image is quite unlike the other images, the photographs that Mann has taken in this album. When one sees the drawing, you know, one possible conclusion is that this is something radically unlike the rest of the images in the archive, because this is giving us an indigenous viewpoint. But I think it then triggers a secondary question, which isn't there something about photography, that there's something inherently collaborative about the making of any photograph. They're always the trace of an event, and there are always indigenous actors in these events.
This is the original catalogue. I think there was a grant, and people did this properly, I think in the 80s. So each card has contact print of one of the images downstairs, and then country and some information. So this is kind of corresponds to the keywords that we have on the computer. But this, as I said, this doesn't say where the original is.
So this is pretty comprehensive, really. It's pretty good.
It's very good. Yeah, I wouldn't get rid of it. I mean, it's easier in some ways to find things unless you're just looking by country on the computer. You can be a bit more specific. But certainly, I think I mentioned before that we have artists in occasionally, and this sort of thing is very good because they can look at a lot of things without having to get up hundreds of boxes. This is Barnard Davis, who was an anatomist. This one here is interesting because this skull has been stuffed with something, and here's a little bit of it stuck on the photograph. One of the feathers that was stuffed into the mouth of the prepared head. Interesting, isn't it? It's still there after all this time.
Well, for my own part, I think I don't think there's any loss of confidence in anthropology as a conceptual project. I just think there's an unease about its relationship to still photography. I think the time is right for some incredibly creative individual to completely transform the terms under which anthropologists use photography. So, I mean, I think we've reached a point where I think more and more people understand that it has come to a halt, but that it can be reinvigorated or propelled dramatically in a different direction. So my sense is if we would speak again in 10 years, then we might be talking about a new movement in anthropological photography, which would be doing something radical, much more interventionist, much more experimental, and potentially very exciting.